This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Kathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Kathy Worthington. Welcome to our latest Late Boomers episode. Today we are going to delve into the world of finance with our special guest, Chad Hufford, who has 17 years experience owning and running a financial planning firm based out of Anchorage, Alaska.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Chad says he has realized that managing his clients' mindsets, behaviors, and habits is really the most crucial part of his job. He helps them to create a better relationship with their future. Welcome to Late Boomers, Chad.
Mary and Kathy, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, please help us to understand your career by telling us about your background and events that led you to your present focus.
Well, I grew up in the financial industry, and I watched my dad have a huge impact, and not just in the lives of his clients, but people in our church, in our community. He taught classes for free on managing money and not so much just investing, but just a budget and basic but often overlooked important financial behaviors. And it was not something that was a particular interest to me. It was like fish discover water last, right? I thought that was normal because that's what I was surrounded with. And as I got older, I realized how fear and anger and scarcity and greed are often more the norms when it comes to finances rather than what I grew up with. And I saw people maybe bumping into him at a restaurant or stopping him in the store and thanking him for the impact, not that just he had on their financial lives, but on the trajectory of their life overall. And I thought, wow, what a powerful, I was super proud of him. But I never really thought of going into it myself. In fact, my degree is in biochemistry.
Oh, really?
I was in the path going into medicine. And what it ultimately got me thinking was I wanted to have a career and a practice that I owned and not a job that owned me. And medicine can be so consuming, and not to say that you can't have a good work-life balance as a physician, but with the things I wanted to do, it would have been very, very difficult to create. So I was looking for another way to have impact and to be able to help people live a more free and abundant life. And I realized that finance was going to be a great way to do that. And a lot of financial professionals tell people that, yeah, we're going to help you find better investments. But what I really wanted to do is help people become better investors. And that's what led me full circle to this. And it's more of a coaching relationship than anything else, because again, you can provide people with the right tools, but if they're not using those tools correctly, they're not going to get as much out of them.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, where does someone start when they're planning for their future, their financial future?
We always tell people to begin with the end in mind. Where do you want to be? And actually, we're in the middle of developing a tool, retirement target tool, because it's really hard to hit a target that you can't hit. And there's a basic first step. So they walk through a few steps to see, what is my target? How much money am I actually going to need to retire and stay comfortably retired for a very long time? A lot of people don't have that. And what happens is they're more collecting investments rather than strategically building towards a desired future. So we want to flip that and look at, if you're building a house, you would start with the end in mind. How big is it going to be? What is it? What's the functionality? What is most important? What are the non-negotiables of my house? We want to ask that same thing of somebody's financial house. What are the non-negotiables in their life? If we were to fast forward your life 5, 10, 15 years down the road, who do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? What do you want that to look like? And attach some financial numbers to that, and then reverse engineer where they want to be to where they are today.
How do you advise people to create better habits and a healthier mindset?
Well, it's a good question, Kathy. It actually starts with that, because if I'm making sacrifices in the present to benefit my future self, if I don't attach it to specific measurable long-term goals, it feels like a cost.
Mhm.
So if I'm putting $1,000 a paycheck into my 401k, it feels like a payment I'm making. It feels like money that is being taken away from me, unless I can attach it to my own specific goals and have a vision for what my future looks like. So it's not costing me $1,000. I'm just paying future Chad and future Chad's family down the road. But without that context, without a plan, kind of a financial blueprint, if you think of it like that, attaching my future self to my current self, it's really, really hard to make those sacrifices. That mindset has to be, this money isn't being extracted from my paycheck. I am literally
Hmm.
paying the future version of me. And I'm making a sacrifice today for a better future tomorrow. And connecting those dots so the future isn't quite so intangible. So it's not quite so vague.
Is that how someone establishes a good relationship with their future self? Can you elaborate on that at all?
Yes. So let me just make a quick statement on that. Um, Vague visions produce vague results.
Oh,
And
Hmm.
so our long-term visions can change. Just like if you were to build a house, when you have a blueprint, you have an architect design everything. But once you start building, things change. Like the tools and tactics evolve as the project evolves. My wife and I, we built a house a few years ago, or had one built, and it was a constant evolution. Your financial plan is the same way. You're constantly adapting the plan, but you always need to have a plan. There's got to be something that is guiding your saving and investing decisions going forward. So when it comes to this mindset, um, and having intentionality, I think that's a really good word. Having intentionality around specific goals. It doesn't mean those goals can't change. They will. But acting on a long-term plan so we're not reacting to the world around us is absolutely crucial. And
mm.
too many people spend, even if they're diligent about their finances, spend too much of their time reacting rather than planning and executing a long-term vision.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Hmm.
Have to
I
come
like that.
to terms
How
with that one.
how should we cope with failure then, and what can we do to overcome it?
Well, in a broader context, I've learned to treat failure as an experiment. So just circle back to the biochemistry days. Um,
Yeah.
we we never went into an experiment without planning. We researched. We tried to troubleshoot. Like, okay, where might this experiment go off the rails? Where are the failure points? But at some point, we had to stop planning and go execute. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they want to make a plan perfect before they begin. And this isn't just in investing, it's in our diets, it's in our business plans, it's in our relationships. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to take any step forward until I know everything is going to work out. I'm sorry, but life doesn't work out that way. So
Right.
at some point, we need to create a plan, but then execute that plan and iterate and learn along the way. And what a lot of people view as failure in their life, in biochemistry, we just called it an experiment. Like, okay, that didn't go the way that we wanted it to. What can we learn from this? But if we go into the
Right.
unknown, not so married to the outcome, but really looking to learn from the experience and actually be educated by some of those setbacks, it totally flips what failure looks like. And when it comes to investing, when it comes to planning your future, there's going to be a lot of setbacks. You might lose your job. You might start over with a divorce. There's times when your 401k is going to look more like a 301k because of market declines.
Yeah.
And if you have a long-term vision, you know what you need to do to get back on track. And in fact, if we just look at that one very narrow frame of a market decline, that scares a lot of people to death. And if you're only focused on the present, it's really scary. You know, you have somebody, let's say maybe they've saved $1 million. They're going to retire in a couple of years. That $1 million is temporarily worth 800,000. That can be really, really frightening and have a lot of anxiety. But if you flip that and realize, okay, yes, everything I've saved has temporarily declined. It's not a failure. You're now buying the best companies in the world at 20% off. It's a sale. People call it a market crash. You're looking at it as a discount. But you have to have that long-term mindset and looking at those setbacks as, how can I turn this obstacle into an opportunity?
That is great advice.
Yeah.
And talking about that, as what are some of the most costly mistakes people who are investing make? Is selling out when the market is down one of them?
It's a huge one. Yes. I think a lot of people misunderstand what financial freedom comes from, and they focus so much on the principal value and not income potential. And
Mm.
so, just a little catchphrase, if your audience wants to remember this, financial freedom is, it's not a principal problem. Excuse me, it's not a principal problem. It's an income issue. So you don't bring your 401k to Costco to buy groceries. You bring your income. So the metaphor that I'll give you to think about is, it's like you've been planting this orchard for 20, 30, 40 years. And if you build your orchard large enough, you don't ever have to sell the trees. You just pick the fruit that they produce every month. So I'm not so worried about how much my trees are worth at any given time. What I'm concerned about is how much income they can produce over my lifetime. So if people focus on income, not principle, they're able to look more long term and not get caught up in the craziness of today. Because the other problem that leads to, and we have a short term view of a long term problem, is we forget that a stable income in a rising cost world is a recipe for disaster. So traditional investments that people think of as safe or conservative, like cash or bonds, they might be stable-ish. We realized last year, or a couple of years ago in 2022, bonds aren't necessarily stable either. But fixed income in a rising cost world is a problem. And again, we have to focus on, what is our income doing, not what is our principal doing. And in looking at that from a different framework, because I think, just to continue on this question, Mary, of common mistakes, I don't think people have a really accurate view of money in general. People think of money as units of currency, not purchasing power. And money really should be defined as, what are the goods and services I can purchase with this. That is money. Units of currency, that gradually declines with value. It's a losing proposition. So if we're trying to maintain our units of currency, we actually gradually lose our purchasing power. So by maintaining our money, we actually need a rising income to meet a rising cost world.
So you partially answered this, but I wanted to ask you next, what are the most common misconceptions in investing and financial planning?
Well, to kind of add maybe a little more texture to what Mary just asked, is a lot of people view volatility as the enemy. And I get it. It's painful. Like, nobody wants to see their nest egg, the value of their lifetime savings, decline in value, whether it's maybe a few percentage points in a day, which happens all the time. Maybe it's 20% over the course of a year. That is painful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're being harmed. So we need to be able to separate hurt from harm, especially for investors that still have a couple of years before retirement or longer. If you can buy the best companies in the world on sale, volatility is helping you. Doesn't mean it's easy, but let's face it. I mean, getting up in the morning and running is not easy. It hurts, but it's not harming me. It's paying a temporary price for a long-term benefit. And because a lot of people view volatility as the enemy, that we forget about inflation. We're dealing what gets our attention in the short term. Because again, you watch your 401k go down 10% in a month, that gets your attention, especially if you're watching it too closely.
Yes.
But up until recently, people didn't really notice how prices were affecting them. It's that slow slow but steady erosion of the value of the dollar. It's a slow and steady decline of purchasing power that people don't really think about. And what it drives them to do is try to stabilize and conserve temporary principal, not long-term income. So what that means is we can't view volatility as the primary enemy. It's, for most people, it's probably inflation. Because if you look at somebody who's going to be retired for, let's say, 20 years, they probably need to double their income during that 20-year period, double the amount of currency produced by their plan. And fixed incomes simply can't do it. So if we're fighting the wrong dragon, so to speak, if we're fighting volatility, then inflation comes in and just does whatever it wants and wreaks havoc on our long-term financial plan.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's kind of scary, but okay. Think about that one. Okay, then talk more about that, because I think it relates to my next question, which is what's the difference between investing strategically for a desired outcome and versus merely just collecting investments?
Well, it's having a blueprint. It's having a strategic plan that connects your current actions with your long-term goals. So, Mary, you wouldn't want to live in a house or work in a building that was built without a blueprint. Um, you
True.
wouldn't want your financial future to be any other way. But too often, people are building without a blueprint. They're just throwing money into a 401k or into an IRA or into a brokerage account. And it's kind of like it'd be like going through Home Depot, just grabbing random tools and building materials off the shelves. And then, we spend some time in there, and then we all meet out in the parking lot. And I'm like, ladies, what should we build with all this?
Yeah.
And it makes no sense. And Mary, you're laughing, but that's how people often prepare for the future. They're just collecting bits and pieces of building material, and there's not a structure or a blueprint for how all these pieces fit together. So not only will it make somebody's investing more effective if they have this strategic blueprint, but it also builds confidence because you can connect the hard decisions today with a better future tomorrow.
Mm.
So let's look
Good
at
advice.
the more spiritual side of it in this question. What are the critical components to living a life of abundance? And along with that, would you please discuss your theories on retirement?
Okay. Well, abundance is not, it's not a finish line. It's not a mile marker. It's an attitude. And I've met with people who are content to live off very little and are so focused on the blessings of their life that they feel abundance. And you could probably take everything away from them and they would still feel abundance and they would feel blessed. And I've met with people who are multimillionaires. They're living in scarcity and fear. And they're not, they can't appreciate what they have because they're so worried about losing it, or they're so worried about what they don't have. In today's culture, we can compare with anybody in the world instantaneously. So it's not just looking at your neighbors down the street and it's like, oh, the Joneses got a new minivan, or they're on vacation again and it's snowing in Alaska and they're in Hawaii and I'm mad and I'm jealous. But because of social media, we can compare ourselves to celebrities and athletes, and everybody is putting their best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we compare our worst days with somebody else's best day. And
Mm-hmm.
by not realizing the damage that does, it destroys gratitude. It destroys appreciation. And we end up seeing only what we don't have instead of being grateful for what we do. And I think that is human nature, but I think because of technology, because of social media, we need to be even more aware of it today than ever before, because it's so easy to lose perspective on how precious our life is and how blessed we truly are.
Mm.
And no amount of money will ever fix that. Because if you're somebody
Yeah.
who does not feel blessed, if you don't feel grateful, more money is not going to fix that. If you are somebody who is fearful about your future, who is afraid of financial circumstances, you give them more money, they just have more to worry about. So more money
Mm-hmm.
fixes money problems like a faster car fixes bad driving.
Yeah.
Like very, very
That's
unhappy
powerful.
lottery winners. But I know you have some interesting theories on retirement. So if you would touch on that.
So we like to talk about retirement in this idea of a job optional lifestyle. Too many people treat retirement like a finish line, and it causes two major problems. Number one, if you're so focused on the finish line, you can miss the journey. You can miss all the blessings and wonderful things that happen along the way and sacrifice too much of the present. So most people don't sacrifice enough. They live they live too much for the here and now and almost treat their future self like it's another person. We buy things today with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like, and then we wonder why we're not happy, And so that's probably the norm. But you have people that go the other side that are so focused on the future that they can't enjoy the present. We need to have balance there, and that's where having a plan, a blueprint, can help people. Is find out how much do we need to build today to still stay on track for the future. But we don't need to work 24 hours. We'll build this and we're done for today. Anyways, so we don't want to miss the journey. But the other side of it is if we view retirement like a finish line, well, what do you do when you cross the finish line? You
Mm-hmm.
stop. And I believe that somebody who has the financial freedom to walk away from a paycheck, they're no longer dealing with the bureaucracy of a job. You don't have to, you're not filling out TPS reports anymore or whatever. You have, I think, the opportunity to have a bigger impact than you've ever had while you were going to a 9 to 5 job. And maybe your 9 to 5 job does have tremendous impact and you stay there and that's awesome. But when you show up to work every day knowing that I don't need to come back on Monday because my investments, my financial plan can support my lifestyle, things just have a whole new flavor. Like your boss isn't going to irritate you as much. The goofy guy from HR isn't going to bug you as much. Like all the stress rolls off your shoulders when you realize you don't need your paycheck anymore. So we want to think of it as a job optional lifestyle where you have the independence to live freely without a paycheck. Because a lot of the folks we work with, ladies, they're the worst people to retire. They're ambitious, they're goal focused, they have a mission in life and a purpose. And I think that's really, really important to have after retirement. We call it purposeful pursuit because
Mm-hmm.
it's not purpose is not enough. It's this idea of pursuit. You need to be chasing something. It requires effort. It requires stepping into the unknown. It requires getting out of a comfort zone
Yeah.
because comfort leads to complacency. Complacency leads to compromise. And if we don't have the right things to chase, we'll end up pursuing the wrong things.
Mm. Yes. So true. So true. Thank you for saying that. You use many fitness and nutrition analogies when you're explaining finances. Why is that? And how do you feel those disciplines are similar?
Well, so I have with a biochemistry background and then doing a lot of athletic coaching, and I had the privilege of working with several professional athletes and Olympic athletes. Been beat up by several UFC fighters. That was fun. But
Oh,
I
Wow.
have a background in coaching, and so I study a lot of performance psychology and sports psychology. We've blended that into our investing because, like I said, we're trying to make people better investors, not just find them better investments. Giving somebody a faster car doesn't help them drive better. You have to change who somebody is to help them best utilize the tools. So I blended a lot of that into how we help our clients get not just have more financial freedom, but become more intentional and purposeful in their life overall. And the reason I use fitness as an analogy is because there are so many parallels in the sense that it does happen slowly. Like you can't have a bad diet and treat your body like garbage for 20 years and expect to fix that overnight. It's a slow change.
yeah.
And it's a discipline. It's something that we have to execute. We have to commit to long term. And even when you reach that place, if somebody is a multimillionaire, you still have to execute those disciplines to maintain what you've created. So if you look at some of these retired professional athletes, you look at them, you're like, wow, I can't believe they were ever in shape, much less an
Right.
elite athlete, because they quit the
Right.
disciplines. And your financial health and your physical health, if you don't take care of it, it will deteriorate. If you ignore it, it will only get worse. And you can do the right thing for 20, 30 years. And if you start ignoring it, you can slowly give up everything you've worked so hard to create. So I
Mm.
think that we need to have that same mentality that I'm going to make small physical sacrifices so I can have more health in the future. I'm going to make small financial sacrifices so I
Like
can
what?
have, um,
If you're retired.
if you're already retired, it might be living on a budget and spending a little bit less now so you're not stealing from the 85-year-old version of yourself.
Mm.
And there's a
Mm.
lot of people that overspend early in retirement and actually have less income overall, because if we go back to the orchard metaphor, they had to chop down too many trees at the beginning, and
Mhm.
they're not able to produce the income in their late 70s and 80s and maybe even 90s. There's a lot of people, Mary, who are going to outlive their income. They're just People are living longer than they expected. And I've talked to too many people that said something to the effect of, well, I'm going to live great as long as I don't live past 85. Well, what if you're 84 and you're not quite dead yet? I mean, I just don't believe I just don't believe anybody should have to die to make their financial plan work. So
Oh.
a lot of people overspend, or you know what? They drag debt into retirement, and and they they have a mortgage, they have a boat payment. I mean, here in Alaska, we're into our planes and boats and things like that. So it's really common, and people tell, I deserve this. Like I've worked hard, and that's great. But don't cheat the 75 or 80-year-old version of yourself because you think the 62-year-old version needs a brand new boat. And some people can afford that. But this is where having a plan is really important, to know what those sacrifices need to look like so they don't overspend in those early years and then steal from their future selves.
Yeah.
Hmm. And you
Mm.
say most people don't properly define money. What do you mean by that? Is that what
Well,
we're talking
I,
about with the income and spendability?
well,
Purchasing power.
partially, but
That's what.
really, right. Yes, it's looking at money as purchasing power, not units of currency, because
Okay. Yeah.
$100 does not buy what $100 did a decade ago. And
Right.
so, just real quick example, if we
Yeah.
look at according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and Social Security Administration, the average retiree in 2024 was born in 1962. Some are older, some are younger, but that's the average, 1962. It costs over $1,000 today to buy what $100 did in 1962.
Ooh, I
So
believe that.
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that means that a dollar during the lifetime of the average retiree. Now, granted, the average retiree is still probably going to live for another 20 years. But just today, at this point in their life, a dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power. So if our focus is just on currency, we're
Hmm.
going to lose the battle because we're fighting the wrong enemy. And when people think of money, they typically think of dollar bills with dead presidents and or Benjamin Franklin on them, and that isn't truly money. It represents money, but that's only units of currency. Purchasing power should be our definition of money. That's what we need to protect. And fixed income is not a great way to fight off rising costs.
Mm. Well,
Hmm.
please tell us about eliminating our mistakes, and also your theory that building a better future is more about what you remove from your life rather than what you add. I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Okay, well, I'll start with a little fitness analogy, because you ladies asked about why do I use fitness analogies. So
Hmm.
um, sometimes people especially younger athletes, they're worried about a new supplement, or what new protein powder, or what food should I be eating. When I used to look at their diets, I still do this to some degree, helping out friends, and we work with one of the SWAT teams. There are some high performance athletes in that, um, but a lot of people look at what can they add. Usually, the first step is, what can I eliminate? Like, yeah, I mean, you can add this new supplement, this new shake, this new bar, but like, let's cut out all the energy drinks, or let's cut out the three beers you have every night, or
Mhm.
the the 2 cartons of ice cream you eat every week. I mean, there's usually pretty detrimental things that people can cut out of their diet that are doing way more harm. And people, it's almost impossible to outwork a bad diet. And here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of people that start their day, like they go to a coffee stand, a little coffee shop or a Starbucks, and they get a coffee and a muffin. That coffee might have 30, 40 grams of sugar in it. That muffin, just a Costco muffin, ladies, I might ruin muffins for you. First of all,
I
it's
know.
not really breakfast. It's morning cake. It's basically
Right.
an early day dessert. A Costco
Right.
muffin has enough calories that it takes about 7 miles of running
Oh.
to work off a single muffin. So which is easier to do, to run 7 miles or to not eat the muffin?
Yeah, I
So that's
agree.
from a fitness perspective. That's from a fitness perspective. Let's switch to a financial perspective. That car that you're buying today, most people don't really worry about the purchase price of the car. They're worried about the monthly payments. But if I write a check for a car, I've paid for it, it's done. Now I still have some maintenance costs and things like that. But if I get a car loan, I bought the car whenever. I'm going to pay for it for the next 7, 8, 9 years, plus all the maintenance. So with debt, people are paying for their past purchases in their present, which destroys their future. And debt is just one example. So by eliminating debt, people free up their budget to actually pay their future selves instead of paying for their past purchases. Eliminating unnecessary spending. Not looking at your 401k all the time. If you were farming an orchard, you wouldn't go up there and dig up your trees and check the root system and count all the branches. You realize this is going to take time. You're just going to let it sit. You're going to water it. You're going to cultivate it, and you're going to add some new trees when you can. But you're not going to go out there and check on the progress every 15 minutes. But people do that with their investments. So just simply not looking at their investments all the time can give a tremendous amount of freedom and confidence. Outside of investments, not looking at your phone the first thing in the morning. I mean, it's really hard to have a good long-term perspective when you look at your phone and, oh, here's a list of, a dozen horrible things that happened while I was sleeping all over the
Right.
world. Like, how do you have a long-term perspective or a good, positive, grateful outlook? So those are just all
Right.
examples of things that we can eliminate from our lives that are burdens. It's like trying to run a marathon with a backpack full of rocks. Don't worry about the new running shoes quite yet. Let's get rid of the rocks in the backpack first. You'll be able to go a lot faster.
Chad,
Oh,
thank you.
Jay,
And
you're so
what would you
right.
like our listeners to have as a takeaway today?
I think that's a good one right there. Is sometimes what you eliminate has more impact than what you add. But I think that even bigger takeaway is getting in the driver's seat of your own life, not just your finances, but everything that we talked about today is really in somebody's individual control. Worrying about the right things, not the wrong things. And maybe not worrying, but acting on the right things instead of worrying about things that are outside of their control. I believe that we are the biggest variable to our long-term success and our future and the trajectory of our life. But we have to take ownership. We have to take responsibility. We can't blame the government, the markets, the economy, inflation, all these different things for why we're financially struggling. Do those things matter? Absolutely. Can we control them? No. But what we do, the choices, the decisions, the behaviors, the habits we have in our lives, those are the things that are going to make the biggest outcome or the biggest impact to our lives. That's where our efforts and our intentionality need to lie.
Whew. That is
Thank you.
brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Chad. That is reverberating throughout my mind right now and will for our listeners too. Our guest today on Late Boomers has been Chad Hufford, financial strategist par excellence. You can reach him on his website, veritasalaska.com. That's VERITASALASKA.com. Thank you so much, Chad. That was moving.
And we
It's
also
been
want
my
to
pleasure.
remind
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. And we want to remind you, our listeners, that we are grateful to you for listening and receiving inspiration from our Late Boomers podcast. We appreciate you, and we ask you to spread the word to your friends about our podcast. We're on Instagram at I am Kathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and on our Late Boomers podcast on YouTube. Thanks again, Chad.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.